Have you heard this story? It's about a girl named Vanessa Frid. Vanessa was born on a stormy night in Providence, Rhode Island, during the 1970s. Her mother, Maria, was a struggling waitress who had 5 children to take care of, including Vanessa. Maria had been a victim of abuse from Vanessa's father, who left the family when she was just a baby. Maria was left to fend for herself and her children in a world that seemed intent on keeping them down. Despite the harsh circumstances she was born into, Vanessa showed promise from a young age. She was a bright and intelligent child, excelling in school and earning the praise of her teachers. Vanessa dreamed of a better life, one where she could escape the poverty that seemed to follow her family wherever they went. But as Vanessa grew older, the constant evictions, hunger, and neglect took a toll on her. Maria was always working long hours at the diner, barely able to provide for her children, let alone spend time with them. Vanessa's once bright future began to dim as she fell deeper into the darkness that surrounded her. When Vanessa was 8 years old, her family lived at the bottom of a quadplex in a rundown neighborhood in Providence. The building was old and dilapidated, with peeling paint and broken windows. Vanessa, her mother Maria, and her 4 siblings shared a cramped apartment that barely had enough room for all of them. The other 3 tenants in the quadplex were a motley crew that added to the sense of danger and despair that permeated the building. The tenant above them was a prostitute who had clients coming in and out at all hours of the day and night. Vanessa would hear the sounds of moaning and shouting through the thin walls, making her feel uncomfortable and unsafe in her own home. Next door to them was a drug dealer who allowed drug addicts to come into his apartment and shoot up. Vanessa would see the gaunt faces of the addicts as they stumbled in and out of the building, their eyes glazed over and their bodies shaking from withdrawal. The smell of drugs and decay wafted through the hallways, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just outside their door. But the most terrifying tenant of all was the man who lived on the top floor. He was a pedophile who had recently been released from prison, his eyes always lingering on Vanessa and her siblings whenever they crossed paths in the hallway. Vanessa could feel his gaze following her, sending shivers down her spine and making her skin crawl with unease. Despite the danger that surrounded them, Maria did her best to shield her children from the horrors of their environment. She worked long hours at the diner, sacrificing her own well-being to provide for her family. Vanessa and her siblings would huddle together in their tiny bedroom at night, seeking comfort and safety in each other's presence. But the darkness of their surroundings seeped into their lives, leaving Vanessa feeling trapped and helpless. She knew that the world outside their apartment was a dangerous place, filled with predators and temptations that threatened to consume them. By the age of 9, Vanessa had one foot in the streets. She would roam the rundown neighborhoods of Providence, looking for a sense of belonging that she never found at home. A shift began to take place within her. She started to exhibit a newfound sense of courage and independence, no longer content to simply follow the rules and stay within the confines of her safe, sheltered world. Vanessa began to crave freedom and adventure, spending more and more time outside, exploring the world beyond her doorstep. As Vanessa's confidence grew, so did her willingness to bend the truth and deceive those around her. She quickly realized that by manipulating situations and people, she could get what she wanted with greater ease. Deception became her main tool, a weapon she wielded with precision and skill to navigate the complexities of her relationships and interactions. With each successful lie and act of deceit, Vanessa felt a rush of power and control. She reveled in the thrill of outsmarting others and manipulating situations to her advantage. This newfound sense of control fueled her desire for more, pushing her to push boundaries and test the limits of her skills and abilities. In her quest to stand out and be taken seriously, Vanessa turned to petty crimes as a means of proving her worth. She engaged in acts of rebellion and defiance, breaking rules and norms to establish herself as a force to be reckoned with. By committing petty crimes, Vanessa sought to distinguish herself from her siblings and her peers and show that she was not to be underestimated. It was during this time that she met Gary, a local drug dealer who saw potential in Vanessa. He took her under his wing and taught her the ins and outs of the drug trade. By the age of 12, Vanessa had completely dropped out of school. She was drawn to the fast money and power that came with being a drug dealer. Vanessa quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the most feared and respected queen pin in Providence. She ruled her empire with an iron fist, crushing anyone who dared to challenge her authority. At only 14 years old, she had carved out a ruthless empire built on fear, power, and deception. Her lavish lifestyle, fueled by the profits of her illicit activities, painted a picture of opulence and excess, but beneath the surface, darkness lurked. As Vanessa climbed the ranks of the criminal underworld, she found herself ensnared in a web of violence and betrayal. The blood on her hands, both figurative and literal, weighed heavily on her conscience, threatening to consume her sanity. The constant need to watch her back, the paranoia that plagued her every waking moment, pushed Vanessa to the brink of madness. Providing for her siblings was both a source of pride and a burden for Vanessa. The guilt of exposing them to a life of crime and danger gnawed at her soul, but she knew that they depended on her for survival. The house she bought for her mother, the cars, the jewelry, and the designer clothes were all tainted with the blood money that funded them, a constant reminder of the darkness that consumed her. Her mother, Maria, watched in silent horror as her daughter descended deeper into the abyss. The fear in her eyes, the resignation in her voice, spoke volumes of the price they were all paying for Vanessa's ambition. Maria's acceptance of the gifts, her silence in the face of her daughter's crimes, reflected a mother's love twisted by desperation and fear. Vanessa, haunted by the ghosts of her past and the shadows of her present, found herself trapped in a cycle of violence and despair. The weight of her sins, the burden of her responsibilities, threatened to crush her spirit, leaving behind a hollow shell of the young girl she once was. And so, Vanessa Fried, the young queen of the drug world, dominated the inner city, her heart shrouded in darkness, her soul tainted by the blood of her enemies. In the seedy underbelly of Providence, she walked a path of no return, a path paved with betrayal, loss, and the shattered remnants of her shattered innocence. As Vanessa delved deeper into the criminal underworld, she found herself caught in a vicious cycle of violence and retribution. Every step she took further down the path of darkness only served to distance her from the person she once was, the girl who had once dreamed of a better life. During a drug deal gone bad, Vanessa's trust was shattered in a single moment of brutal betrayal. The only person she had relied on in the treacherous world of drug dealing, her friend Gary, had turned on her in the blink of an eye. A high-stakes drug deal spiraled out of control, descending into a maelstrom of violence and deceit. The sharp cracks of gunfire pierced the night, shattering Vanessa's world into a million irreparable pieces. The warm blood that seeped from her wounds mingled with her tears, a bitter cocktail of pain and sorrow that threatened to drown her in despair. As the darkness closed in around her, Vanessa felt a crushing weight on her chest, a suffocating sense of loss and betrayal that threatened to consume her fragile spirit. The agony of the bullets tearing through her flesh was nothing compared to the agony of realizing that the one person she had trusted with her life had plunged a knife into her back. With trembling hands and a heavy heart, Vanessa raised her gun, the weight of her shattered trust heavy in her soul. The sound of a single shot echoed through the desolate alleyway, a haunting requiem for the friendship that had once sustained her in a world devoid of light. As Gary's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, Vanessa was left standing amidst the wreckage of their shattered bond, her heart bleeding as profusely as her wounds. The once vibrant dreams of a better life now lay shattered at her feet, a cruel reminder of the price of trust in a world where betrayal was the only currency. In that moment of treachery and bloodshed, Vanessa's world was plunged into a darkness so profound that even the brightest stars of hope seemed to flicker and fade. Alone and broken, she realized that the path she had chosen had led her not to salvation, but to a desolate wasteland of pain and regret. Vanessa soon started to use cocaine and heroin, and she often drank when she used. As Vanessa's empire expanded, so did her reliance on cocaine, heroin, and alcohol to numb the pain of her shattered trust and brutal actions. The drugs and alcohol became her only solace in a world where darkness reigned, their seductive embrace offering a temporary escape from the harsh reality of her existence. With each hit and each drink, Vanessa felt herself slipping further into the abyss of addiction, her once sharp mind dulled by the haze of substances. Paranoia and delusion gripped her tightly as she struggled to maintain control over a crumbling kingdom built on betrayal and bloodshed. The shadows that had once offered shelter now loomed menacingly, threatening to consume Vanessa in a darkness from which there was no escape. But Vanessa's reign of terror was coming to an end. She was caught in a sting operation by the FBI. Facing a mountain of evidence against her, Vanessa made a deal to become an informant in exchange for a reduced sentence. She turned on her former allies, helping to bring down some of the biggest players in the drug trade. But betrayal comes with consequences. One of Vanessa's rivals discovered her true identity as an informant and sought revenge. In a violent confrontation, Vanessa was forced to defend herself, ultimately killing her rival in the heat of the moment. As the news of Vanessa's ruthless act spread through the criminal underworld, a chilling silence descended upon the city. The once powerful Queenpin now found herself isolated and feeling vulnerable as law enforcement closed in. With the evidence mounting against her, Vanessa's world collapsed in on itself, a house of cards built on a foundation of blood and deceit. Vanessa was soon arrested and charged with murder. The trial that followed was a grim spectacle, a stark reminder of the consequences of a life lived on the edge of darkness. As the guilty verdict was read, Vanessa's heart sank like a stone, the weight of her sins crushing her beneath their burden. She was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Handcuffed and shackled, she was led away to a prison cell, the cold steel bars a stark contrast to the opulent trappings of her former life. In the depths of her solitary confinement, Vanessa was left to confront the ghosts of her past, the echoes of her actions haunting her every waking moment. The once feared Queenpin was now a mere shadow of her former self, a broken soul adrift in a sea of remorse and regret, her reign of terror reduced to nothing but a bitter memory, the darkness of her cell mirroring the darkness of her soul.